Phone, this one, hooray. We're good there.
It's even fun to spell. It's the Douglas fir, right?
Yeah.
Douglas.
Okay. Oh, Jesus Christ. How many things can there possibly be? You'd swear we're trying to log into the fucking Pentagon. That's not right. That's the other password.
Because I'm switching my name to students.
Also, I thought I came up with a new drag.
Yeah. Did you know that there is actually one called?
All right. We're here. Hooray. We made it, everybody. 10 minutes in. No big deal.
Honestly, so I was doing lab work for
Because I still have it, because I was rallying for advance, but now my sister's gonna be, I'm gonna be Prince Charming now, so I'm having four, I think, and I was like, might as well.
Great. Presentation view. Oh, Jesus Christ.
There's a couple ones that I really like. Sweet Sicily, Blue Eyed Mary. Pick them up on that.
Are we working? Nope. One day will work. Oh, let's go. All right. Where did we leave off? Hyraxes? All right. We left off at the toes, right? The weird toes. It's all right. For whatever reason, no screen. Double checked it. It's all connected. I don't know. Probably has something to do with an HDMI cable going to an HDMI coupler, which is going to a VGA converter, which is then going into a VGA box, and then going into the what, like, you know, there are cables that just go from one port to the other one. Why don't we just use the one cable instead of having four different like, I don't, ISUIT. Slam. All right. So here's what the outlook looks like for the foreseeable future. We'll finish this out, which won't take long, and then we'll go to Euclidecontes. I think it's how it's pronounced. Euclid. I don't. Whatever it is. When we get there, I'll say it correctly. I can't remember at the moment. It's a long word. That will take a long time, like multiple weeks, to get through that, because that is like the rest of all the Therian mammals. And it's like been put into like a super group of this is like everything else fits in here. So that'll take a while. That includes stuff like bats, it includes carnivores, you know, so on, so on. Then not next week. Next week we should be dissecting stuff, hopefully in lab. Yep. Stuff like a rat. You know, I don't know that I have anything else to compare. I have a bunch of butchered pheasants that I could bring in. I took the breast meat off of them, so. They're not preserved, obviously. They're just, you know, hunted birds. And so after about an hour or two, they'll be thought out, but they'll also, their guts are still in them. So that could go either way.
Campus, it says we have an assignment due on November 7th, linear regression assignment.
Yeah, so I got to talk about that. Don't let me forget. I'll talk about that Friday. All that is, you know what a linear regression is? No? Okay. All right. Okay. Where? Jesus Christ. Who's stealing all the stuff? Highlighter, pen, who's got a dry erase marker? Right. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Linear regression.
Just in case.
This is a linear regression. And then it has an R value and a P value. Okay. And so like there's the assignment itself is a bunch of made up data that is concerned with rabbits and rabbit litter sizes. We'll go over rabbits specifically, but rabbits are induced ovulators, which means that the act of copulation itself is what causes the female to ovulate. And interestingly, in rabbits, it should be the case that the act of copulation more and more causes larger litter sizes to happen because it induces more ovulation, right? Does that make sense? So the more opportunities that happens, the larger the litter size should be, such that it is an increasing amount, right? So it's just like you have data points throughout, and you're going to get a certain R value, which is goodness of fit, and then a P value, which is the significance value, right? The closer the the closer the goodness of fit to 1, the tighter the data it is along the line, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be along the line for it to be significant, right? So you could have something that you have that looks like this, where it's just like this, and then R equals like 0.0, I don't know, 9, and then the P is still 0.04. That's still significant, right? And that's still a significant result. What that means then is that only 9% of the variation in X is explained by Y. Does that make sense? Okay, because this is 9%, yeah? So if this is 9%, what you're testing is this X variable versus this Y variable. 9% of the independent variable is explained by the variation in Y, is what you're saying there. It's such that it would be significant. But you know, the closer it is to something that looks like this, right? Like if you have something that's like this, and then your P value is like 0.85 or something, and this is like 0.02, that's like really, really good, right? This pretty much doesn't happen in nature like that, you know, not in biology, not what we're concerned with. If it was physics or chemistry, then this would be seen as terrible, not good enough, right? But then you're working with subatomic particles that are going to act a specific way all the time, this, that, and the other, right? They use 0.0001 as significant in physics because, you know, it's just different. So that's what that experiment or that assignment's going to be. You'll have a week to do it. I'll talk about it more on Friday. I'll bring it up and show you the data and such, but it's not very involved. It should make more sense than the binomial test thing. You've seen line graphs before, right? So you know about what it's gonna be like. So dissect stuff next Monday. I got to remember to send something to the lab manager. I always forget her name downstairs. Does anyone know her name? She was hired after grad school, so I haven't committed it to memory. And then the following Monday, weather permitting, is bison field trip, or not bison, bighorn sheep field trip, which would not be overnight. It would just be, we leave early Monday and then go to Jackson, right outside of Jackson, really, on the highway that's just north of Jackson there, if for those of you that are familiar, just like north and slightly east of the elk refuge, right there. There's a highway that runs around next to moose and so on. There's cliffs and hills over there that bighorn sheep usually mate on every year. But we would just go until we find them. Usually they're there, but again, they're wild animals, so I can't assure you that they're there. But their rut is the best to watch simply because they're really aggressive. And so the amount of fighting that ensues is quite nice. Then we just come back that night. Okay. Would anybody know for sure that they couldn't go on that then, since it's just one day? Just Monday? Okay. All right. Of course, weather permitting, though, we got snow on our peaks here last night or whatever it was, night before, I don't know. So I don't know what it's looking like for the Jackson Pass between Jackson and Victor, right? But if we got snow, then almost for sure it snowed there. And yeah, no, could have been fine yesterday. That doesn't mean anything, right? Like it's just, so we're just going to do a best guess kind of thing. And it's like, well, that Wednesday, it's looking good. And then we'll like double confirm that Friday. It's like, looks good. We'll plan on it. Yeah. You know, like, you know, even if it says it's not supposed to snow, that doesn't mean anything for the mountains. Anyone that's ever spent enough time in the mountains knows that 30% chance is like almost a guarantee, right? And 60% is like, it's gonna snow. So it just, we're at the whim of the weather. We could, yeah. If we're planning on it, if the weather looks good, but then it snows a lot, we could go up through Alpine. Takes a little bit longer, but you know. If this was a graduate class, then we could all stop at Melvin Brewing too, but it's not a graduate class, so that's not allowed. Well, I would, Melvin Brewing has good food too. All right. Good for the like foreseeable future plan. Okay. How are projects going? Okay. How's the squirrel? Okay, that's all right. What's everyone else doing? I don't remember. Nut stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Nut stuff. Possible raccoon, still unsure. Possible raccoon hat, not sure. Otherwise, deer behavior. Cougar feces have been deployed. Mule deer. So you're redoing my project. That's what I did in mammalogy. You're on your way to like developing the thing. How close can you get the squirrels? That's right. Hallie, what was yours? Squirrel tails, right? Brooklyn, what was yours? Squirrel problem solving. That's right. Okay. ISO, what is your moose behavior? Where are you finding moose? Okay. All right. Are they all over there? Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, that's good. That'll be interesting then. There's also a lot of moose along Highway 14 in Wyoming. In case anyone ever wants to hunt moose, there's a ton there. I don't know why, but okay. Foreseeable future covered. All right, golden moles, tenarex in Aphrotheria. These guys still more closely related to elephants than they are like a hedgehog. Right? Let's look at this guy. Tenarex looks like a hedgehog, not a hedgehog. Right? It's got a spiky back, a nice little nose that you would find on a hedgehog kind of thing. It looks like it should be a great pet. It is not. Yeah, it looks like it's sharp. It's not actually like that pokey. Less so than a hedgehog. So I've heard. They're in Madagascar only, which is a relatively large island still, right? I mean, it looks small on this. This is called the Mercator projection map, right? Which is not even close to accurate, right? I mean, this is gigantic in comparison. Madagascar is like over half the size of the entire US East Coast. All right, so it's actually quite large. But there is adaptive radiation coming from them to spread across Madagascar. And then obviously, you can just look at them, know that they're in Aphrotheria. So, okay, they're in Aphrotheria. The general assumption about Aphrotheria is pretty much everything in here has got convergent evolution somewhere, right? Like that's pretty much the entire thing, minus elephants. But pretty much everything else is convergent evolution just as a result of Africa being in its own island for, well, the entire Pleistocene, right? And surviving through the Pleistocene relatively unscathed. And then how long was it separated? About 50 million years ago is when it started finally converging with what is now Israel and Saudi Arabia, right in there in the Suez Canal. Okay, these golden moles obviously aren't necessarily a mole, right? They look like a mole, and they look kind of. For those of you that know what a pocket gopher really looks like, we actually have examples over here. Might as well just get one out, yeah. They look like a cross between a mole and a pocket gopher. I was hoping to get pocket gophers for someone to dissect, but I couldn't come up with any. It's not like I have a permit to just go start tearing apart pocket gopher holes either. Chipmunks. Bunch of mice. Here you go. Little pocket gopher. Definitely was killed by a cat. Puncture wounds. Pass the guy around. Just right at the top, you can see it's just, it probably didn't suffer. Let's put it that way. All right, not related to true moles, family Talpidae. There's 21 species, which is interesting, especially considering how much divergence would have happened in a short time for this to be the case. Here you can see them occupying loose sand pretty well. They hunt using a sense of smell. They don't have any eyes, right? So that's one of the reasons why they're similar to a mole, right? There's some convergent evolution happening there where They have highly developed sense of smell and hearing, but no eyes. Consume a bunch of termites and well, I guess I don't want to say they don't have eyes. They have eyes that's not functional, so they don't really have eyes. Technically, yes. If you're watching Futurama ever yet, technically they have eyes, but they're pretty worthless. All right. Elephant shrews are, again, not related to shrews, right? And they're related to elephants, but they're not directly related, right? We branch off and we see that, all right, we're coming back a little bit. Elephants are up here. So we have to go through a couple of common ancestors and breaks to get to them. But nonetheless, they're still more related to elephants than they are a shrew, right? Okay, so these guys are also called senjis, senjai or senjis for plural. It's not an elephant. It's not a shrew. It's not a teneric. It's something completely different. It is an Afrothere, though. And look at this coloration. It's like interestingly colored plumage with the orange looking head. Their nose, they have a really long rostrum on them, right? They look very similar to a lot of the small rodent-like metatherians. I remember looking at those and it's like, oh, that looks like a rodent, but it's not. This looks very similar to a rodent, but it's not, right? So it's got that same thing going on, but it's not either of them. Down here, there's 2 videos to plug in and watch. That's the whole URL. You can just plug that in, watch them. They're not terribly long, but they're good to see. These are mostly located across southern Africa. So South Africa, Zimbabwe, things that are underneath the African rainforest. So what is that? Chad, Niger, Dominican Republic of the Congo, anything south of that should be, and the further south you get, the better you're going to be to find these guys. Nothing north of that, though. What else? Females have menstrual cycles much like humans. How much do you know about a human menstrual cycle? Anything? Ladies, do you know a lot about your own menstrual cycle? It sucks. I mean, I'm glad I don't ever have to deal with it, that's for sure. Phases. You have Varian phase, the luteal phase, yeah, okay. Essentially, all right, can you explain what happens then? Just so everyone isn't like on the same page, that way you know what this is saying. What happens before you shed the inner lining? Well, you know what happens before you shed your endometrium? Okay, what happens before that? There's a whole phase before that. Not the same. That's a reptile. The hormones are pretty much the same, though. Brooklyn, what happens? Sean, what happens? You're a guy. This should be important to you.
I was staying quiet. Or shed litter lining.
Yeah, okay. Now we're just on this now because this is like an important biological topic. This is all reproductive biology. Like this is central to evolution. So this is good. We should know what this is. This seems like an aside, but now I'm going to put this on the final. We all understand how reproductive biology would be central to evolution and biology, right? That's like the direct connection to how that's like very important. Okay, good. Now I'm going to definitely, this is going to be an essay question. Draw out and describe to me Eutherian reproductive cycle.
And then like the egg drops, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which one's
Like I
with
studied
sperm
this.
in the uterus?
Yes, but what happens before all that?
Not-
Okay.
I thought it was like hormone things.
Well, it is.
Okay, specifically, I don't know.
Okay. All right. You ready? I'm definitely going to ask this to you now because it's a central theme in biology. So I'm definitely going to ask you. Ready for me to describe it to you? All right. You know that in human women, it's a month-long cycle, right? Okay. It's a month-long cycle. It starts with the release of gonadotropins, which is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Those are stimulated by the release of a hormone, another hormone, called GnRH, which is gonadotropin releasing hormone. What do you think gonadotropin releasing hormone does? Releases gonadotropins. Not everything has to be complicated. That one's just right there for you, right? That one's easy. Okay, that's produced in your hypothalamus. Your anterior pituitary releases follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. What do you think follicle stimulating hormone does? Stimulates the follicles. Again, not everything has to be difficult, right? Stimulates follicles in an ovary. Men also use FSH, and that stimulates seminiferous tubule growth in testes, which is the analog of the ovary follicle, right? It's the same thing because testes were once ovaries that have then descended, right? Okay. Luteinizing hormone stimulates the production of sex hormone. So in women, it stimulates the production of estradiol. And in men, it stimulates the production of testosterone. All right. We're not going deep into endocrinology, but you need to understand some of it to understand what's going on. So just surface level. One thing that I always harp on when I tell this to people is that there's no such hormone as estrogen. That doesn't exist. If you look up estrogen hormone, what you're going to get a picture of is estradiol. Like the organic molecule drawn out, you're going to get estradiol because that's what they're talking about. Where we came from in medicine talking about testosterone, which is a specific hormone, and then they say estrogen, which is 20 different hormones, I have no idea where that came from. Like you're being ultra specific, saying one thing, and then you just said something really general where you say this class of 20 hormones, like what? Be consistent. Either it's androgens and estrogens or it's testosterone and estradiol, right? Like, where's the consistency? I don't understand. Okay, so GnRH gets released, that stimulates FSH and LH to work. When that happens, a follicle in an ovary starts to develop and an egg gets deposited in what is called the corpus lucidum. Corpus lucidum is where an ova matures. It hangs out and matures over like a 2-week period, right? So a woman or a female, whatever eutherian animal, right, has all the eggs that she's going to have ever when she's born, right? But that doesn't mean that it's matured yet. It's still just one singular cell that's lying dormant until it's put into a corpus lucidum, right? It's put in this corpus lucidum, and then the egg is maturing, doubling, tripling, quadrupling in size until it reaches its full mature size. Once it reaches its full mature size, the corpus lucidum ruptures, and then the egg or ova falls out. While it's maturing, though, before it falls out, the endometrium itself grows and like doubles in size. It doubles in size for what reason? So that there's more surface area for an egg to catch, for a tryptoblast to catch on and implant on the uterine wall. That's what it's for. And if the uterine wall, the tissue it's made up of is like columnar epithelium, which you don't care about, but it's really long tissue that's in there. And you increase the surface area so you can increase the nutrient delivery across to the zygote, and you can more easily grow a placenta, because during pregnancy, women have to grow an entire another organ, right? So not only are they like developing a zygote at that time and then into and whatever, right, a fetus, they have to actually grow another organ, a placenta, which is a job within itself, right? So increasing the surface area increases the efficiency of that happening. Does that make sense? Right? Just increased surface area in the realm of biology is just better, right? Like in a lot of cases, which is where you get structure equals function, all from bio one, and then volume and all this and cells and so on. Okay, that happens. Once the egg is deposited, you have finger-like projections that are on the end of the infundibulum. Those are there to grab an ova. Sometimes it misses. What happens when it misses? The egg falls into the body cavity and it just hangs out there. If you're lucky, your immune system deals with it and it gets reabsorbed. No harm, no foul. If it was in the infundibulum and there's sperm there, it could get fertilized and then fall out. Then what happens? Ectopic pregnancy. Is that a problem? What is the end result of every ectopic pregnancy ever? Death. If left alone, it kills the woman every time. Right? But now in Idaho, you can't worry about that until you're almost dead, which is dumb, even though you know that it's ectopic pregnancy right now, right? Like, no matter how you feel one way or another about abortion, it's like, well, we know for a fact this will kill you, right? Like that, there should be some kind of like reasonable, logical being like, okay, we need to be somewhat reasonable here just with the biology and be like, all right, this is a problem. We should deal with that now. But you know, all right. If it doesn't fall out, then it's in the infundibulum, comes down the uterine tube. In human medicine, for whatever reason, they chose fallopian tube. In mammalogy and everywhere else, it's called uterine tube. That's the proper name, uterine tube. The whole entire thing from ovary out to vulva is oviduct, right? So there's just different sections. When you go through after the infundibulum is the isthmus, which is just a term taken from geology, right? What is an isthmus? It's a small connection place. So it was used to describe like channels between islands. It's an isthmus. It's a connecting channel between point A and point B. So the infundibulum is really wide to grab eggs that are literally falling out. It travels through the isthmus, which is a smaller area, until it widens out again, when it gets to the actual uterus, right? Okay. It gets to the uterus, then it would then implant on the wall, turn into a tryptoblast, so on, right? If that's not the case, egg falls out and you shed uterine lining, that is the bleeding itself, right? Is the literal shedding of the uterine lining, because it's tissue that's then being reduced and the blood volume from it's being lost. That's what's coming out as discharge. Okay? Got it? I don't see many people taking notes, so I'm going to ask you that now. For sure, draw out to the best of your ability and tell me what's happening. Important. Reproductive biology, important. Important in evolution. Evolution matters. I care about evolution. Why? It's the defining term of all biology is evolution. It's the one thing that all subdisciplines of biology comes back to is evolution. So, and that is mediated by reproduction. So here we are. All right, what time is it? All right. Aardvark. We've talked about these guys. They're relatively weird, right? What is it? It looks like a pig anteater with, it's like pig, anteater, and donkey. Yeah. I'm gonna say like rabbit, maybe. Look at the ears. It looks like a hair, like ears of, I don't know. Um, it's really weird. Like, what is this thing? You know it's an aardvark because you've seen one before, right? Like, of course. But it just is like this weird looking thing. They're really, really successful, though. They're widespread across Africa. And keep in mind, Mercator projection of the map. Think of how big Africa really is. It's gigantic. And so if they're really successful everywhere south of the Sahara, pretty successful animal, right? Like really successful. They eat predominantly ants. They'll eat termites too, right? But it acts like an anteater and eats a bunch of ants. Not endangered at all, mostly nocturnal. That's not to say that they won't be active during crepuscular times, though, of course. You all good with crepuscular? Know what the term means? Crystal, you good with crepuscular? Active during dawn and dusk. Okay. So those are like most predators, or well, North American predators, especially, are predominantly crepuscular. They dig pretty well, especially with the end of their nose. They have that really long rostrum there. Not really closely related to anteaters at all. That's kind of a theme here in Aphrotheria. Convergent evolution, everything within it is related to itself, of course, or related to one another, because Aphrotheria, they're all in the same group. But short of that, they look like other animals, not related to them. That's a point that's like driven home, hopefully by now. And they are relatively significant across multiple cultures in Africa. So it's not like Africa just has one culture, right? Like it's been there for a long time. Obviously, humans have been there for a long time. There have been many different tribes and tribal cultures that have arisen that an aardvark plays a large role in. I think it plays a relatively large role in Zulu culture, which is, if I had a guess, one of the only African cultures most people have heard of before, because it's a weird, fun word to say. And then I don't know what the does anyone know what the tribe that uses clicks as their language is actually called? I can't. That sounds right. Exabi. Like if you, yeah, I mean, obviously it's pronounced with like clicks, but if we were trying to pronounce it, it's like something else. So I obviously don't know the click sounds to pronounce it the way they would, but it's something different. I've heard some polygot try to talk to them before, and they got like super excited. They're like, "Oh my god, this guy's like doing it!" Right? All right. Here is the teeth of an aardvark. Look how tightly packed they are together. Like this, and then this is nicely packed in here. You can see the dentin in here coming through the root of the tooth there, and the enamel. The top of it wears down quite a bit, similar to what you would expect in herbivores. Those would be hypsodont teeth. They're high crowned, and probably butodont, I would say. One crown, another crown, another crown, another crown. There's not really any crescents. There's not any ovals. There's nothing there, right? So, okay. That pretty much closes out this, right? So chapter 16 starts the next unit, and we're going to start with rodents. Rodents are a big deal. There's a short PowerPoint that I'll go over that has to do with how important rats were to human culture. It might not seem like a big deal, but rats have played a large impact on us, right? I mean, you had Black Death, and then all the scientific investigation that's been done on rats, right, has come back for us tenfold, more than that, 100,000, whatever, for medicine and so on. So pay attention to that in particular. But we're in the phase now where this is just gonna be like one huge PowerPoint over multiple weeks with some other ones inserted in here and there, right? So it's just gonna take a while to get through, is all. Okay. Sorry about the, I don't know. At least it's not blinking every 2 seconds. That's all I can say. Hopefully I'll get it figured out for Friday. Otherwise, it's fine, I guess. Whatever. Yeah. I'm not the helpless old professor. We won't worry about this yet. Eventually, we're going to do another essay. I don't know if I want it to be over 10 or X, but we'll do something else. I think maybe carnivora. Pick your favorite carnivore and do that instead. More people like that. So more on that later, though. And
Of course, fire.
Actually, yeah. It could be that we're also not touching the outside.